I started watching an anime titled I've Been Killing Slimes for 300 Years and Maxed Out My Level. Unsurprisingly, it is a light novel adaptation. Going into it, I was very skeptical on if I'd like it given the very gimmicky setup that most isekai are known for, but I gave it a chance and I enjoyed it a lot. Normally, I find the idea of an overpowered main character to be really easy to mess up, but Azusa's power and wisdom are used in a really compelling way. Instead of flaunting it to the audience, Azusa instead chooses to live a very humble and relaxed lifestyle, this being something that the other characters observe to learn from in various different ways. While the story has its issues, I found myself really enjoying it by the end, in part due to how strong its message is. Life may seem overwhelming, and your time may seem limited, but if you rid yourself of your worries and just allow yourself to find enjoyment in the simple things, you'll be more than satisfied. It goes without saying, but this is a very powerful message. Although, it did feel familiar. That was when I realized that this is a CGDCT, and if you don't believe me, check the mal tags, which are always reliable and never make mistakes. But for the grass-touching nerds who don't know, CGDCT is a subgenre of slice of life standing for cute girls doing cute things. The genre first got its anime debut with 2002's Azumaga Daioh, which was adapted from a 1999 4-koma manga. Even so, the genre didn't start seeing immense success until the legendary studio Kyoto Animation brought more attention to it, starting with Lucky Star in 2007 and causing a renaissance with 2009's K-On! K-On! Is one of my favorite anime of all time, and in my opinion is where the genre peaked, even if another anime comes very close. This is because it just intuitively understands how to write this genre. So, that's where we finally get to the title. It's a bold claim indeed, but I think that CGDCT is by far the hardest genre of anime to write. Well, let me rephrase that. It's the hardest genre to make a genuinely good series of, and especially a masterpiece in. This is because CGDCT is inherently a bad idea. Every genre has some sort of hook to it. Comedies make you laugh, dramas make you cry, romances play off the strongest human emotions, yashike calm you down after your boss just yelled a slur at you, mysteries and thrillers build suspense and excitement, and action pumps you up more than anything else. So, what happens when you build a series of no romance, drama, suspense, or action? That is the question that CGDCT attempts to answer, although it does have some cards up its sleeves. While entirely optional, most CGDCTs are also comedies, although not in the way that something like Nichijou is a comedy. Nichijou's entire purpose as a series is to be a joke dispenser, while the comedy of a CGDCT generally comes up more naturally as just a result of good, engaging character writing. So, after having to define such a loose term that is, frankly, up to interpretation, it is now time for me to explain how to write the genre well. And what better way than for me to gush over K-On! K-On!, as it is, absolutely should not work. It basically boils down to 40 episodes of girls drinking tea, and yet it's one of the most fun series to watch that I've ever seen. One that's able to combine that dumb fun with an incredibly powerful message and an ending scene that just rips the soul apart. But in short, the reason why K-On! Works is the reason why any decent CGDCT works, and it's that the characters are good. What I find so striking about K-On! Is how deceptively simple the characters are. They're so simple, in fact, that they can be described in just one word. Yui is an airhead, Mio is anxious, Ritsu is a tomboy, Mugi is rich, and Azusa is serious. Characters this simple shouldn't work, but KyoAni made it work by doing two very important things. The first is by giving their characters more depth. Yui is a great example as the protagonist. It would have been so easy to make her an annoying asshole, and yet she's one of the most endearing and earnest characters I've ever seen, as a result of just how clearly she loves her friends. Many tasks may be difficult for her, and while she will often indulge in her selfishness for a gig, we're never left questioning why she's friends with the characters. It can either be because of a grand gesture like cramming her studies or guitar practice, or it can be as subtle as breaking her bad sleeping habits to show up sooner than all of her friends. It's delicately balanced writing like this that makes Yui feel like a real human being instead of just an anime character. The best part is that the writing quality is maintained throughout the whole cast. My favorite example to pull from is Mugi. At first, she seems like the weak link of the band due to her non-existent character development. The base trait of being rich isn't particularly interesting either, but it's made interesting by her endless curiosity. She wants to experience aspects of the normal lives that her friends live, and it's due to that curiosity that we'll see her indulging in much of the same chaos as Yui and Ritsu, despite having a personality more similar to Mio and Azusa. It's because of this added depth, along with her ability to so seamlessly get along with everyone, that I'd wholeheartedly consider Mugi to be at the heart of K-On!, even if I'd agree that she's the least interesting of an S-tier cast. But as Mugi is at the heart of this series, she's also the one who perfectly represents the other thing that K-On! Does an excellent job at. Not only is it preferable to have characters with added depth, but it's also preferable to have characters who interact uniquely from each other. Good character interactions, one which showcase a new side to them depending on who they're talking to, is something that is so important that it can turn an otherwise nothing series like Lucky Star into an incredibly entertaining experience. In Mugi's case, with much of her motivation revolving around living life normally, she has much of her fun with Ritsu. As Ritsu is very adventurous and energetic, it allows Mugi to be with someone who can show her many new things about the world. This is a dynamic that is so strong that they even dedicated an entire episode to it. Her interactions with Yui are similar as well. Yui is very unabashedly herself, and her lazier personality and love for sweets allows her to appreciate the tea Mugi offers more than anyone else. As Mio acts more refined than Ritsu and Yui, it gives Mugi a character who's more similar to her on a personality front, and it allows them to get along quite well. This is contrary to Azusa, who despite being more serious, simply doesn't understand Mugi's love for the other characters' chaotic lives. Other characters excel on this front too. Yui and Ritsu get along extremely well, indulging Mugi's desires and playfully teasing Mio whenever they can. Meanwhile, Mio's relationship with Ritsu is very well developed. They're opposites in terms of personality, and yet you never question them being childhood friends as a result of the clear boundaries they set with each other. They very clearly respect each other as well, with Mio admiring the ways in which Ritsu motivates her to overcome her anxieties, while Ritsu admires the more regimented personality that allows her to be so helpful in times of need. But my favorite character in K-On! Is the one that exemplifies why that final scene made so many people cry, and that character is Azusa. Azusa gets introduced halfway into the first season after the core formula of the series has been more than established. She's a year younger than the other characters, and has a big drive to make the best music possible. As a result, she's the biggest source of conflict in the series. Even so, the group really cares for her, and it's that love and care that starts to affect Azusa. Despite how lazy Yui is, she's the most outwardly loving toward Azusa. Even though Azusa disagrees with Yui's lifestyle, she's so loving toward her that she can't help but appreciate what Yui brings to her life. I also like how she interacts with Mio a lot. Mio is very similar to Azusa, but given Mio's higher level of maturity, she's able to let her feelings go as she allows herself to have fun with the other characters. While Azusa spends much of the series not understanding where Mio comes from, she still chooses to stay in the club. This is where her character arc is allowed to begin. It's a very subtly developed arc that sees her learn that being the best musician isn't the most important thing in the world. While Azusa started by being defined by her guitar, she ends the series being defined by her love for her friends. It's no coincidence that she shares Yui's instrument, as their arcs mirror each other. Yui is a character who has to learn that she needs some sort of hobby in her life, a goal that she can strive for. Meanwhile, Azusa needs to learn that her friends are more important than her hobby. The series never says that one of these characters is rid of flaws, because that would be ridiculous. I've actually had parts of my life where I ended up relating to one over the other, as they're both very human characters who learn very different things about how the world works. It's for that reason that the final goodbye between them is so effective. Even though this may seem like a series about 5 girls drinking tea on the surface, it's actually about the careful balance of how to prioritize your friends and dreams. These characters crying knowing that Azusa won't be able to join them in college. It's a scene that works because of all these seemingly inconsequential moments that came before it. This, right here, is the finishing touch for how you take an already great series and turn it into the crown jewel of the genre, the bona fide masterpiece that has come to define everything that has come after it. Ever since, most of the genre has tried to emulate K-On! To mixed results. That's why it's always great to see when a series tries something different, and among my favorite of these is New Game. It still has a character-focused narrative, but this time the arcs and character development take a bit more of an active focus. While the characters of K-On! Often avoided making music, New Game takes place in the working world where that's not really possible. Thus, more focus is put on the characters' passion for game development. Even so, it's still a very comforting series where conflict isn't often found. As a company is obviously a bigger home than a school club, its protagonist Alba winds up meeting more characters. Thankfully then, they're all quite fun, and while all of them continue the pattern of being very easy to describe on the surface, their interactions and pre-established relationships help keep them human, most of which even getting little character arcs as the series goes on. But all those are strengths I've already mentioned prior. What really helps New Game stand out is the very unique theme it tackles, something that many of these series struggle to do. That theme is how to tackle jealousy in a healthy way. Although, not from our protagonist. The reason Alba wanted to become a game developer was because of the art she loved seeing in Eagle Jump games, wishing to create characters for the company. When she meets the lead artist Ko, she's struck with nothing but joy and admiration. But this relationship takes a shift by season 2. At this point, Alba's skills have grown significantly, and to her surprise, she takes Ko's spot as the lead artist for their next game, and it allows for a genre known to be comfy and cozy to have a moment of legitimate tension to it. I think that's ultimately why a plot point like this works so well in this genre, because it takes your preconceived notions and flips them on their head to create something uniquely great. And that doesn't even begin to describe the delicate maturity that the writing shows in handling this subject with respect, both characters still being professional with each other despite that tension. It even resolves itself quite nicely too, as Ko ends up learning that she has an important role in training Alba to be as good as she is. It's for all those reasons that I have such a deep respect for New Game, as it dares to do what so many others fear. But New Game is child's play compared to the anime that are more dedicated to destroying expectations. Yes, CGDCT can get dark, and there's no better display of that than with Gakkougurashi and Girls Last Tour. The former takes place in the middle of a zombie apocalypse, while the latter takes place in a post-apocalypse. But how could these series possibly be so compelling when the idea sounds like a joke? To those who think that, I have a question to ask of you. What is the big main theme I've been discussing in this entire video? Well, it's to make the most out of life, and to take things slowly. Want to know what the main theme of zombie apocalypse shows are? Yep, these two genres are more similar than you think. Girls Last Tour uses this for a simpler and more relaxing approach, only having 2 main characters. Chito is the one more aware of how dire her situation is, often butting heads with the more carefree Yuri. It's with each other's help that they're both able to survive and enjoy themselves in their dire situation. But Girls Last Tour is only able to be an Ayashike because it takes place so far into the future, where the worst has already came. As for the characters in Gakkougurashi, their hell is far from over. Despite the two shows seeming similar on the surface, don't get it twisted. Beyond the cute aesthetic, Gakkougurashi is a horror series. With zombies swarming their school at every turn, these 4 girls need to survive with everything they have, and each of them contribute to their themes wonderfully. Yuki is the central character, one who copes with her drama by pretending that the series is just like any other, her presence being the only form of normal normalcy that the characters can cling to. Yuri having to stay calm despite her circumstances, Kurumi having to fight off zombies, and Miki having had a near-death experience, is these rare moments where they're able to goof off that I think the series really shines. These are characters in the worst situation imaginable, and yet they're still able to enjoy their time together. Despite how stupid the premise may sound, that, I think, captures the essence of this genre more perfectly than most. So that was a lot of me talking about anime that I like. What about the ones that I have more complicated feelings on? God fucking damn it, why do I have to have hot takes? While I really enjoyed Yuru Camp's first season, I think it progressively got weaker over time. To me, the greatest strength of Yuru Camp, beyond how calming the titular camping scenes are, is the relationship between Nadeshiko and Rin. These two characters are at the core of what makes the series so compelling. As Nadeshiko is our extroverted puppy dog of a protagonist, the idea of her pushing herself to become friends with the more introverted Rin could have made her into a really annoying character. That's why I was really surprised by how likable she is. Instead of forcing Rin to live the way she does, she instead tries to understand her. Seeing her get help from Chiaki and Aoi to get better at camping, and eventually going on her own solo camps gives the impression that she actually respects Rin, and I think that's something that a lot of writers can really drop the ball on. Rin, on the other hand, might genuinely be the most realistic depiction of an introvert I've seen in any anime. No matter how much I preach the values of social interactions on this channel, as an introvert, I think the time spent on your own is extremely important. Yuru Camp is the only CGDCT that I think handles this well, and it absolutely deserves praise for it. For me, the time I get to spend writing to myself is time that I find extremely valuable, as it allows me to sit through and process my thoughts and feelings. Watching Rin use camping to do this was something that I found to be really relatable, and it even got me interested in what a solo camping experience could look like. Yuru Camp is at its absolute best when it explores the growing friendship between Nadeshiko and Rin, but of course, they eventually do become friends, and while the series still has some great moments, I think it slowly begins to overstay its welcome, and it's because the characters are low-key kinda boring. I think they're great on their own. I mean, I sung so many praises for the main two. Hell, my favorite isn't even either of them. Chiaki is hands down my personal favorite. Her goofy personality and tendency to mess things up I found to be really fun. She gives off this manic energy that I just find really entertaining. That said, I genuinely can't tell you anything interesting about her relationships with the other characters. Aoi is her childhood friend, but I don't really know why they're so close. I also couldn't tell you a thing about what she thinks about Rin, a perspective that could have been really interesting, but just isn't utilized to its fullest extent. The only great character dynamic in this series is Nadeshiko and Rin, but I otherwise couldn't tell you the relationships between anyone. This is why I prefer Lucky Star, a series with worse themes and simpler characters, because the relationships between each character are far more fleshed out. That's ultimately why I think Yuru Camp is overrated, despite it having some very notable strengths. To me, however, those character dynamics and relationships are the main thing that make this genre so strong. Although, that's not all. Non Biyori is a series clearly influenced by the success of K-On! It has a good understanding of character writing, a powerful message about appreciating the simple parts of life, and a unique country setting that gives its characters inherently different things to do than most of its contemporaries. Based on this description, I describe it as a generally good series, likewise as I would with Yuru Camp. Either way, I didn't find that it had much of a lasting impression on me, and its 3 seasons overstayed its welcome much more than I was expecting them to. It was a series that really made it clear to me how difficult it is to make something within this genre that stands out. K-On! Also could have felt like a chore to finish, and yet its very clear path toward an ending made it so that even the most seemingly unimportant moments would have an effect on that ending. CGDCT is inherently about the journey instead of the destination, and yet I think it's the destination that cannot be ignored, even if it's not supposed to be the point. Non Biyori does have a decent enough ending, and yet I felt more relieved than sad for these characters. K-On!'s second season, one which could have felt just as monotonous, is one that's made interesting sustained by the looming tension of how these characters will one day have to say goodbye to Azusa. This is why no moment feels wasted despite how much of its time is spent with simple tea drinking. I know when I say this that I'm misunderstanding the intentions of Non Biyori, which is supposed to be an Iyashike that's supposed to be rid of that tension. But I also don't find that idea all that compelling. Even if it's not for me though, I can at least take solace in knowing that it's a hell of a lot better than a lot of the slop that infests this genre. I've only seen one CGDCT that I've actively disliked, but it did a great job at showing me what people who dislike this genre think the genre is. I was honestly baffled when I watched Azur Lane Slow Ahead. The idea to make every episode only 8 minutes would be great for a gag comedy like what Uneo-san does, but in a slow-paced genre like CGDCT, 8 minutes is no time at all. This results in every character being a boring melee blob with next to no personality. I can hardly critique it because it's just a nothing series with nothing to talk about, whether it be good or bad. The characters are nothing, the plot is nothing, the themes don't exist, the jokes aren't funny, and all that ends up putting these genuinely solid character designs to absolute waste. The funniest thing too is that this is very likely not the worst of the genre, given how it's at least a short watch that you can finish in a day or two. It's substanceless slop like this that truly does give this genre its negative connotation. This is what people who misunderstand K-On! Think K-On! Is. Speaking of which, finally I get to talk about Bocchi the Rock, which is not only completely genre-defining, but also just straight up one of the best anime we've received in modern time. I cannot overstate just how good Bocchi the Rock is. All those passionate feelings I had when I made my initial videos in 2022 persist. Not only does Bocchi the Rock manage to be great for how clearly it respects the legacy of those in its genre, having one of the best casts of any anime I've seen, but it's also able to innovate in some truly groundbreaking ways. While the series is mostly a comedy with a plot moving slowly in the background, it also has an incredibly strong emotional core related to its main character overcoming her social anxiety. Bocchi's character arc is one of the very best I've seen in any anime, and it's one that has nearly brought me to tears the same way the gut-punching ending of K-On! Did. Even so, I think comparing Bocchi to K-On! Just doesn't feel quite right. K-On! Is a series that focuses on how it's okay to take things slow, that true happiness comes from sharing your hobbies and passions with others. Bocchi the Rock, on the other hand, agrees with K-On!, although there is a catch. Bocchi proposes that if you're unable to make friends or experience the outer world, that you can't begin that character journey that Yui and Azusa were able to. That's why, just like of K-On!, I genuinely go as far as to say that Bocchi the Rock changed my life forever. That one key ingredient that K-On! Missed out on with its two most important characters is something that Bocchi the Rock puts all of its focus into. It was through watching someone as hopelessly socially inept as Bocchi that I began to realize that I too could break out of my shell the same way she tries to. Sure, my character arc may not be over. I may be just fine in many cases, but I'm still awkward around my coworkers and people I happen to see on the street. But so is Bocchi. As long as I'm trying, then surely that's all I'll need. It's through that expansion of its contemporaries that Bocchi the Rock manages to be more than worthy of passing on that torch. But for as comparatively plot-focused as Bocchi the Rock is, its character work is some of the best I've ever seen. It's yet another example of simple characters who you can describe in just one word. Bocchi is anxious, Nichijou is an optimist, Ryo is confident, and Kita is an extrovert. Even so, every character has unique ways in which they interact. Bocchi starts off scared of all of her band members, scared of how extroverted Nichijou and Kita are, and scared of how much sure of herself Ryo is. Even so, she grows to respect and admire all of them. She respects Nichijou's ability to maintain order in the band despite the many challenges they face. She respects Ryo's genuine love of music and creativity, and my favorite of her relationships is with Kita. Kita, while being a socially gifted extrovert that everyone loves to be around, is also someone who shares a lot of Bocchi's fears. When she's so loved, if she screws up guitar, then what will people think of her? It's a different kind of anxiety, but it's something that Bocchi and Kita are able to bond over as Bocchi helps Kita improve at her craft. That's what makes the relationship so interesting, as it's not just Bocchi who puts Kita on a pedestal. Kita sees how good Bocchi is at guitar and admires her for it. She sees Bocchi as a cool and talented person, something Bocchi needs in her life, as her horrendous self-esteem has her locked in this depressive cycle. But that's not the only character who's able to show each and every side to Kita. Nichijou is someone who Kita is able to get along with incredibly well as a fellow extrovert, and her more positive nature allows her to keep Kita grounded despite the self-doubt she routinely faces. I think the most telling relationship, however, is her one with Ryo. Kita crushes hard on Ryo, since Ryo, while not a fellow extrovert, is someone completely rid of insecurities. As Ryo is so sure of herself, Kita admires her for it. At least, that's why I think Kita's attracted to Ryo. Speaking of which, Ryo and Nichijou are childhood friends that I can really buy the friendship of. Not only do they share their music hobby, but they both have their shit together enough to be able to maintain a really healthy bond. Sure, not every character in Bocchi the Rock is as important as the others. Bocchi and Kita are pretty clearly the main characters with arcs to overcome, while Ryo and Nichijou are merely meant to accentuate that development. But it's the same way in K-On! Too. Yui and Azusa are by far the most important characters there, while Ritsu and Mio act as great supporting characters and Mugi just chills as the soul of the group. Given how strongly I feel about that cast, I think that Bocchi the Rock passes with flying colors. And while I ever so slightly prefer K-On's cast, I think Bocchi the Rock has a very valid case for the strongest cast in genre history. But alas, we now look closer toward our conclusion. Normally, I'd like to dedicate it to answering the title's question, but I have a more important question to answer first. Why do I care so much about this genre? The easy answer is obviously that there's something inherently heartwarming about seeing cute girls being cute. But of course, I would like everything in the genre if that was the only reason. A cute girl is only memorable if she's well written, and the best of this genre has affected me more than any other. I mentioned earlier how K-On! And Bocchi the Rock have changed my life, but I want to go into more detail with that. I first watched K-On! When I was 14. At the time, I lacked ambition and saw myself identifying with Yui's character arc. Halfway through the year, the pandemic struck and it gave me a lot of free time. When that happened, I rediscovered my love for making YouTube videos. Miraculously, I actually started to see some modest success for what I was used to, eventually rounding up as a competitive Pokemon channel. I enjoyed my work, but I did eventually start to grow older. One thing I always feared was having a normal job. As a result, I started creating out of fear instead of passion. Around this time, I had rewatched K-On! Several times, and my new favorite character was Azusa. I could relate to her drive to be the best, and her disappointment in how others lacked her enthusiasm. Even though I had analyzed and understood her character arc very well, I never had the foresight to apply it to my own life. Azusa is my YouTube profile picture because she's a stark reminder of the growth I want to achieve as a person. It was through burning out, quitting my Pokemon channel, and making more time for my relationships that I'd consider myself to be a much happier person. Yet, just as Yui's arc suggests, having a passion to keep you going is still incredibly important. That's why I continue to make YouTube videos, not out of fear of what my life would be like without it, but instead out of genuine love for the anime I cover. While I tried to focus as much as possible on what the series itself does for the genre, I absolutely cannot deny the more personal meaning it brings to me with all the ways I've had my life impacted by it. That's why Bocchi the Rock was so important to me, because it was the first time that those emotional highs had been reached for me ever since all of those years prior. Part of why I chose my lifestyle in high school was not only because of my drive to make videos, but also my fears of being judged by others for being an obsessive anime fan, a fear caused by the bullying I received in middle school for it. Bocchi the Rock came out when I was 17, and it was through seeing Bocchi make an attempt to overcome her social anxiety that I made the attempt to overcome mine. It started simple enough, with me wearing anime merch to class, an utter shock that no one picked on me the same way they did in middle school, and I grew from there. In my first job, I made genuinely decent friends, and while I don't feel those same sparks flying in my current job, such a mindset isn't what I'll need. That's to say that actually learning from the media I consume is a very difficult process, and it's often taken me years to do so. Even then, I don't think that works against those series in any way, as they're what set me on my current path. I think it's notable, though, that I could only name 2 series which I personally consider to be masterpieces, and I think that takes us back to the claim I made earlier. So, why do I think that CGDCT is so difficult to write? Well, I think it comes down to the fact that you have so little to work with, which means that you had to focus on strong character writing to make one of these series compelling. Better yet, you had to make good characters who are easy to explain and have interesting multifaceted relationships with other characters. As long as you do either of those things, or at least attempt to do those things, I think you're more than worthy of the genre. What makes this so challenging, though, is how difficult it is to get that one thing right, and how even when you do, you have to stand out in some sort of way. That's why I respect something like New Game for the more subtle ways in which it innovates, cherished Gakkougurashi for its genius premise, and love Bocchi the Rock for the ways it took those years of progress to create something truly generational. Hell, I can even appreciate the maturity of Yuru Camp and calming atmosphere of Non Biyori, even if they're not my cup of tea. I'm all sure the initial wave that popularized CGDCT may never return to what it was. I think that's okay. Genres are allowed to change and expand their scope, and if we get more masterpieces like Bocchi the Rock as a result, then I couldn't be happier for the genre's future. But what's next in store for the genre? Well, not much really. The genre's been fairly dormant after its boom in the early 2010s, this current season only having one new one airing. I did mention that Slime series for a reason though, and it's because it's finally getting a second season after a long 4-year wait. The genre may not be booming anymore, but the fact that it exists speaks to how important its best series are, and boy am I excited to stay along for the ride. As if it wasn't obvious, CGDCT is among my favorite genres. But before we conclude, I just wanted to give an apology for how long it took to release this video. It's not even like life's been all that busy for me, it's just been hard to sit on my PC and focus on one project whenever I get the time to. By the time I upload this as well, I'll likely have picked up a second job, which will mean that the monthly upload schedule that I wanted to stick to will not be possible for me. While the old me could have released a much worse version of this video in just 2 weeks, I chose to take a lot of time in thinking about how it would be best to present this video. Believe it or not, but this was a very hard video to write in a way that I'd find compelling. For those of you who don't know either, this video is actually a remake of a video I made about CGDCT when I was only 16. The original video basically boiled down to several mini reviews put into one video, but I wanted to be more ambitious this time by actually discussing how each series tackles their genre specifically. Not only so I could prevent the K-On! Section from being hours long, because believe me when I say that I am fucking obsessed with that series, but also because I wanted there to be an actual purpose behind each of these discussions taking place in the same video. In that case, I hope I was able to live up to my ambition, because I frankly don't know if I did. I'm very hard on myself, but if you enjoyed this video, then I really couldn't thank you enough for it. If you want to watch the original version of this video as well, then that option will be in the description. But as always, I still need to thank my wonderful Phantom tier patrons Mystic Owl, Jesse, and Squizzy, and my Confidant tier patrons Regimania and Eternum. If you want to add your name to the list, as well as get plenty of other benefits such as a private Discord server, over 300 scratch video ideas, 500 unlisted videos, early access to my videos, previews of upcoming videos, and my entire Google Drive, you can find it on Patreon. I also have a final tier that no one's bought yet, so perhaps you could be the first name there. While donations are the best way to keep the channel going, views, likes, and comments help a ton as well. No matter which one of these you happen to be, I thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you all next time.